then it does summaries and key points, and I don't know if it's something we want to use. But I just want to let you know I'm doing
All
that.
right. So it is being live streamed right now. Um, and the way, so according to the guidelines right now, there's, 3 voting members, and Aaron and I and Carol, who's the select board member, are non-voting members. We're just kind of here for information that you might need from us and help you through the process. And so the goal of this particular meeting is to choose a chair and then a secretary. And then you could start the discussion about how you want to proceed from there, and how you want to stagger the meetings and whatnot. There are the next 3 Fridays that are secured to meet at 2:00. So we have those on the schedule that you had agreed to. But it's up to this board to really determine how you want to meet and what works best for you moving forward.
Okay. So who wants to get
Okay,
thrown under the bus?
At the,
I was going to make a motion if John's willing to accept that John Rent be chair. If anyone want to second the motion?
Sure.
Chip warned me the other night, and so unless somebody is jumping forward with their hand up, I am willing to accept.
Okay.
Congratulations.
We have a first, a second, and all those in favor,
Yeah.
say aye. All right,
Aye.
we have that.
Okay,
As
and I
far
would like to nominate Chip to be the secretary of this group, if he's willing.
you're breaking up. No. Well, all of us are old enough to remember the word secretary when we first started working. So I think it's yes. I mean, I can help with that. I have, and it depends on what it involves, but this minutes meeting taking, I think we'll see, we can investigate it. I think there's some pretty capable software that will make it easy. So it's not necessarily like that. Going forward on, what we need for secretary, I've done over the years a lot of digital organization of notes and so forth. I do have, I'll warn you that I've used an exceptional piece of software for over 15 years. And it is to prevent the email blizzard caused by new people, groups, and long-term projects. We've all worked on those where chains have been broken accidentally, and we're looking for something that happened 6 months ago. And the name of it is Basecamp. Actually, that's Apple used it to design the iPhone. I've used it for over 15 years, and we can go into that at a later date. There's millions of people that use it. At why that might help us, and we can try it out for free for a month and see if people are okay with that. But it really is, I think we'll all agree that chasing emails at our age is really laborious and frustrating. So anyway, that's kind of
Well, thanks, Chip. So you agreed to, and
Yeah.
Jim's not on board.
Hey, Jim.
Jim and Carol joined us. We had a quorum, so we started, and Chip nominated me to be the chairperson of the group, and I was voted unanimously from the group of 3 that was here. Then I nominated Chip to be the secretary, and he is willing to do that. We need a second to that, and then we couldn't vote. The voting members being myself, Chip, Jimmy, and Jim. So all in favor of Chip being the secretary, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Jim, we don't want to leave you out if you had your heart set on either one of these positions.
I had my heart set on neither of those positions, so that's
Okay.
perfect.
All right. The terms of these, I think the terms of these is about 60 days. So we can revisit it in 60 days. Okay.
Okay, So earlier on, Vika said that we've got the next, you said 3 Fridays scheduled. I marked 2 on my calendar. I'm okay with the next 3. So I guess that's one question. Is everybody else okay with the next 3 Fridays at 2?
Assuming the
Well-
last one is the 24th.
Yes, yeah,
That's
including
yeah.
today's, this Friday, the 17th and the 24th are the 3 Fridays that you all were okay with setting up for now, and then,
Okay,
you know,
so we'll leave it at that for now.
Yep.
If everybody's okay with that.
That's good.
Okay, and then I guess the next thing to discuss is how we get started. And Vika shared some of the a lot of the historical information with us. I know some of us had looked at it. My head was spinning a little bit with all the various documents.
they're all the documents you asked me for.
No, I know.
It's
But-
not your fault. Yes.
I guess
Very
at the
true.
end of the end of the day, where I got to is, I think, a similar place to where the ad hoc committee from last year started. And that was, I think our first step is to understand the current situation and have put in front of us the 8, 10, however many pieces of history that paint the picture for where we've been as a town with respect to revenue, expenses, capital spending, capital reserves, etc. And then walk through those documents. Many of them are looked at by the select board as part of the budgeting process, and make sure we all understand it and where we're at and historically where we've been, and then see what kind of questions and concerns or opportunities that raises. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, I think, and Vicky, you can probably guide us more. And we were at the meeting the other night, the budget meeting. But we have an end goal of having this ready to present to the town to see if they want to vote in a committee and form of an official committee by a town meeting.
Yeah, so the way that this particular committee is designed right now, what the select board voted on is the current guidelines that have been adopted by the select board is a sample ordinance with the suggestions that you are expected to follow. And the goal is for you between now and the end of the year to work off of those guidelines as a group. And then when it comes time to town meeting, present the ordinance, whether it's the way that it is now or whether there are tweaks that you as a board feel like are needed to it, present that to the select board, and select board will make a recommendation to add that to town meeting and allow the taxpayer or the voters the option to choose whether they want to vote this in as an official ordinance or not.
So that would be town meeting 26.
In June.
This
So
June,
Vika-
25.
Vika, I thought, I might be confused, but I thought we kind of changed direction a little bit, and my recollection was we had ended up with a committee, that may or may not become a permanent standing committee by ordinance, but I thought we had assigned a capital plan as sort of one of the initial tasks, or am I totally off base?
Yeah, so if you look at the guidelines as they are written, the first duty is to develop and maintain a capital plan prior to the annual meeting, you're going to submit the plan to the select board for approval.
Oh,
And then
okay.
present the plan to the public. You're gonna make the recommendations to the select board to how to improve the budget planning process. So that's, that's really the task that this board has at this point. And,
Right, okay.
yeah,
So, and this is still whatever we call it. It's not necessarily a permanent committee unless you guys, I mean, if you guys
So
recommend it become
com-
one, then it will be. Is that the deal?
the committee, as I understand it, these committee members have been appointed to a 3-year term. And what is temporary is your finance committee guidelines that you currently have that you're following. You're
Okay.
using that as your guide, in which the goal is to adopt and prepare a capital plan. But part of your job too is at the end of this 6-month time frame prior to town meeting, bring a recommended capital plan to the board. But also, if you have any suggestions, improvements, or changes to the current guidelines, have those prepared and ready, because the goal is to bring these guidelines as an ordinance to town meeting, where it gets adopted as an ordinance, and then you have an actual ordinance to follow and not the guidelines. And I think and Carol can speak to this, I think the reason that it was done this way is because the ad hoc committee prepared this information with the recommendation, and then the board, you, who will be working as a committee for the next 3 years, will have the option to make implementations to it before it gets adopted as an actual ordinance.
Right, and I think also, it's sort of, sorry, I'm just coming back to this from like this time from last year, but the other part of it is that we feel that if it becomes a permanent, it is a committee, but we feel the town will need to weigh in on it, the town meeting, if we generate an ordinance, so that's kind of the purpose, is to make sure everybody's on board with the select board has created this committee. The next step would be town meeting to adopt it as kind of a formal committee, right, Bika?
Yes, and with this, I think, when you have committees that have ordinances that they are required to follow, they hold a little bit more, I don't want to say credibility, but it is kind of the case. So, and I think that's something that the board has felt would be important as much of an input that they're hoping to have in the future from the finance committee.
So the capital plan is one, but also recommendation about changing the budget. Should we be attending somehow budget meetings then to learn more about that process?
I think that if you have some of you that are interested in it and would like to participate, you're more than welcome to. I think that's also where Carol and I can help out if there are board members from this committee who are unable to participate in that process, because we are part of that budget process. So we would have some of that information to provide to you.
And I think it would be great to the extent you can, but we have a lot of meetings and, maybe coming to some of them. The ones that are particularly useful would be the capital planning meeting, one of the departmental budget, as we go through the departmental budget, but there's several iterations of that. So, not necessarily every one if you don't have time. I mean, people are welcome to come to all the meetings. And then we have some sessions when the nonprofits come in and present. So those, I think the different elements of the budget process would be good to see to the extent you can. And they're recorded, so you can watch them afterwards. So, if that's a better option, do it that way.
Okay. And maybe if there's one that strikes you as particularly important, to just give us a heads up that this would be
Yeah,
one.
the capital planning meeting would be the most, I would put that on the priority list if you could come to that.
And is that the one that's on 122? On the schedule, it says capital expenditures on
That is correct.
122. And then the departmental budgets, first one is 2A, and then the nonprofit presentations and capital expenditures are 3-1. Do you have all those dates on one piece of paper, Vika, that you could share with us? Or I got them off by looking on the website and clicking through the calendar.
Yeah, yeah. I can provide a one-page summary of all of it for you. What I typically do as we get a little bit closer in the process, and I did it last year, is what I'll do is I'll create a one page with all of the dates of the budget, but then I'm also going to put in dates for the deadlines that we need to meet in terms of when, when we have to have the town warrant complete and signed by the selectmen and so forth. And I think those dates would be really helpful to have a full understanding of the information that has to be done prior to the June 14th meeting.
Yeah, right. Good idea.
And oftentimes with the capital budget, we'll talk about it early on in this January meeting, but we're going to have to revisit it again towards the end of the budgeting process when we have a better sense of all the other parts in terms of how they're panning out. But it is kind of, the most significant cost for the budget. And so it might be that we actually cover it in two separate meetings. That's usually how we do it, right, Vika?
Yes.
I have a question about the scope of the capital plan we're supposed to produce. Does that include recommended sources of revenue, or is it just expenditures? For example, do you say this is something that could be bonded versus this is something that ought to be budgeted routinely, or is that a question that's within the scope of what you want us to do?
I think it is, we're looking, I think we have some thoughts on what it could be there. I think, Vika, you put the last draft we had up there. I think obviously sources of funding become important, but I think we tried to do a bit of an inventory last year. I'm not sure it's complete, but I think our first step is sort of to figure out what it is we know, what we have and what we know that's coming down the pike, and sort of start getting into the space where we can project some costs. And then I think also bonding, but so I'd say, as far as you can go, but it's a lot, I think the last one we did was 2020. Then I tried to do an update in 22. And then the finance committee last year did a bit of an inventory. Some towns use merely a spreadsheet process of sort of going through and keeping track. There's a bunch of tools out there, and I do think seeing what other towns, Massachusetts has sort of a standardized process, which I wish Maine did, but find what tools might work. It doesn't have to be like a written plan. It can be a spreadsheet that we keep up to date. So, and then I think the funding aspect would be sort of the second step. Whether you can get to it this year or not, I don't know.
And my second question is, I looked at the schedules for the current capital facilities of the town, and they seem to be somewhat different kinds of schedules. Is there anywhere a roster of replacement needs or dates when replacements are needed for the current capital plant?
When you say schedule of the current, what
Well,
can you?
for instance, this piece of equipment's gonna need to be replaced in 2028. This building's gonna need serious renovations by 2032.
Yeah,
Or
so we
we-
currently don't have anything like that in place.
Okay,
And there is a,
So if you were looking at a spreadsheet, that there was the Pownell example of they've got a multi-page macro embedded tool that the ad hoc committee said might be something that would benefit us. I spent a little time looking at that, and I personally like that type of tool. I don't know how quickly we could pull that together, or, you know, if that's the right one to use.
Or
But back to your question,
do you need an engineer to give you some assessments on some of this plant also is the question.
Yeah, I would think so.
I think for a lot of the things you can figure a lifespan, and there's pretty standard schedules that you could use, and there's, I think we would take a first cut at it. Some of the large scale projects we really haven't got in there, and we need to get them in there. And then, for example, we've got some, storm related stuff that has occurred since last year. So I think even just getting a complete list, doing our best to kind of estimate the time frame for replacement cost and, that sort of thing. And then we'll have to refine it with time. So that's why, to answer your question about the funding, just getting a schedule together that's as complete as possible that's a bit of a task right there.
I did, John, I agree with you. I did look at the spreadsheet, and I've done quite a bit with spreadsheets over the years. And it's enormously complex. The formulas that they use, the lookups and the if-thens and relative statements to, tying in tabs and so forth, that kind of scares me. Maybe some of you guys are comfortable with that, but my experience with using other people's spreadsheets is it's really hard to follow their thought process of creating them. I think as a template, for a dry template, so to speak, of how they did it is good, but I'm not sure. And one of the things I'm always cautious of whenever I do anything is, I do understand those if I had time to learn them again, but it's very complex. And is there anybody else on the island or ready, willing, and able to dig into those and roll up their sleeves and understand them? I certainly can. And so, but I'd be happy to take that. I mean, it's really, a spreadsheet at that level really is, a spreadsheet is a flat database with an XY axis. They really need a relational database, which I've had some experiences with, for tracking assets and that type of stuff. Otherwise, you get into all kinds of crazy. Just click on some of those formulas and look at them. They're 75 characters long. So that kind of scares me. If anybody's got a better idea, I would be willing to take that as the basic. And as the ad hoc committee did populate it with some of our assets, and then kind of build it from there and start more from, and Jim's asking questions, so I understand computers have spent a lot of time using them, not nuts and bolts of them. I don't know anything about bonds. I'm glad Jay does, and I'm glad we've got a professional planner, Jim Hartling, who's been doing this for his entire career, because I don't understand either one. But I'd be happy to dig into that and try and make a simple spreadsheet and then build it so that we can use it and repair it if it's broken. If this one breaks, that's the thing that worries me. It's extremely complex. So I'd be happy to do that and populate it with the asset that Vika said. We can start with that, current values and do some simple things of.
So what I put in the document just now, which was already in the folder for you guys, is it's something that we started doing in last year for $250, $300 extra. The auditors were able to provide us a fixed assets report. And so we have that from fiscal year 23. As Carol said, some information from that to the current year is a little bit different, but I just put an Excel document of that information into the folder. And so I think that might be a good start, where what they do is they have listed the year, the original year or acquired year of that particular asset, the original cost, and whether with improvement and things like that. And so that might be a good start if you're looking to update that, and knowing on the year that it was acquired could help determine, a lifespan. And I think for now, you know, if we're looking at acquiring an engineer or somebody, that's gonna cost money, and the board where it stands, it does not have any authority to expend any kind of money or use services that cost money. So I think to the best of your ability to be able to provide that information, based on some information that's out there, would be, I think, ideal.
Just a quick historical thought, if I might. It used to be, for instance, with the fire and rescue group, that Ralph had a plan as to when he needed the next ambulance, when he needed the next pumper truck, and so forth. And every year going into the reserve accounts, we would set aside a certain amount of money, which would eventually get us to the point when we came to buy that whatever truck, ambulance, or whatever, that pretty much most of the money was already there and available by setting aside, you know, annually ahead of time. And that was usually based on Ralph's estimation as to the life of each of the fire trucks and so forth. It was a very simplistic way of scheduling what we would need and going forward in that direction. You know, just as a thought as to how it has been done previously, not by any means that we need to do that again. Just one other thought, and I'm going to hit on a different topic, if I might, is that, as I understand, I'm going back to, I guess, some of what Jim and Chip were talking about, is the town's looking for us to come up with an ordinance.
No.
Okay.
So the committee guidelines that you are following now is pretty much a written ordinance. The goal is at the end of this year, going into the new year, new fiscal year, you look at the guidelines that you have and that you've been following and determine whether they work or, you know, what could be added or changed. And then that document will be brought to town meeting and adopted as an ordinance. So you already, you know, that work has pretty much already been done. You're just going to provide feedback and maybe tweak it a little bit to make it more efficient.
Okay. And the second part is the capital plan development, which is what we've been talking about. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that in my own mind. Thank you.
Vika, I have a question. You mentioned you put a document in the folder. Is this on a shared drive?
Yep, it's something. So a little while ago, I sent you all an email letting you know the folder that I put all the information in.
But do we need to have authorized access to log into your shared drive?
I allowed access to that particular folder. So I know some of you have already seen it, correct?
Yeah, that's where I got the documents, but okay, it's an ongoing allowed access. Okay.
Yeah. And what I just put in it just now is I put in there, you'll be able to look at it under capital folder that I created is the most recent schedule that Ralph had provided in terms of, I don't know where he got it, and he had sent this to Herb and Bob, so I had not received the document, but it's for fire and rescue. It's, you know, a schedule for year 2025, some ideal accounts that they're looking to put into reserve.
Okay, and can we also put documents in this folder? Once it's open, we can either.
I mean, my understanding is now that you have access to it, you should be able to.
Yeah, I'm open it now. Let me just check and see, but okay. Okay.
Is there
you guys
anybody?
can use that folder as you please and do what you need to. I created that so it's originated in, you know, the town world, and you could do what you need with it.
Has everybody accessed that? Has anybody, you know, if you need help accessing it, because sometimes the select board members have, so just let us know, because everybody has different levels of comfort with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I went in there a couple times and I think you had to remember the code number that you gave us originally. I don't know whether I have to put that in every time or not, but I got in successfully.
When I just logged in, I put in
If
my email and they sent me a new code.
Okay,
That's been my experience. Every time I go in, I get a new code.
you sure it was a new code or the same code repeated? Because I think I got the same code a couple times, and so I wrote it down once. But a question: if you put an Excel spreadsheet in there, can we open that in our own Excel folder and play with it, or how do you preserve the integrity of the original document?
I
So-
want to go ahead.
If you open, I guess from your perspective, when I open these things, I'm in the web browser, it allows me to work in the document and it automatically saves it in the original place that it is. If you open it as a different document on your computer, then it's not, but it is a web-based area. And so if you're in the web-based world and you have it open that way, then it will save any changes you do in there and it will show who's in that document.
So
Okay.
you could potentially collaborate together on a single document similar to like a Google Drive. And so the only thing that gets tricky is if you may want to save, versions.
Right.
So right. So that's all. But I mean, you can kind of go in and live make changes, but it will change it and that will be your new version. So when we've done this in the past, sometimes we've just created incremental versions.
And you said, Sobika, when you're working on the web browser, it's collaborative and it will save changes. Does it record who made the changes and when?
At least
You muted.
You're muted,
Carol.
sorry, I'm not sure because we've kind of upgraded our system a little bit from the last time. So I don't
Okay.
know the answer to that, but I don't think so.
Okay.
So one thing in my mind as we go through this process, having the shared file is great. We need to be respectful of Vika's time, that we're not all, we want this information, we want that information. You've got a lot on your plate already. So I'm just, I guess, mentioning to the team that we can't put 1,000 information requests out there, and we should probably develop our information requests in our meetings and check with you that it's reasonable to provide that information. And then related to that, the ad hoc finance committee looked at some history, for example, history of revenue, history of expenses, history of millage, history of capital spending. I think we probably want to update that and create a system to maintain that picture that shows capital reserves and capital spending through bonding as a percentage of our expenditures and what the trends are. How do we most efficiently get the historical information, like 15 years of expenditures, revenues, capital spending, et cetera, so we don't have to bang it into the spreadsheet ourselves? Is that information in an Excel spreadsheet that you can put on the drive, and then we can extract it from that to create graphs, charts, do comparisons?
So I think if you're looking for any of that historical information right now, your best bet would be to go to the ad hoc committee and see what information they've collected, because I think they've done a lot of that homework already. And then for you, the goal, it would just be to maintain any new years that would come I think
Okay.
one important thing that you want to keep in mind is, referencing to the duties that are outlined in terms of what your goal is. And right now, the priority is to develop and maintain a capital plan. And so the historical information will be helpful, but that's not something that the board is expecting or looking from you. It's really maintaining, the capital plan, and then, being able to make recommendations on to how to improve the budget planning process, which I understand that you'll need some of that information to be able to provide that information to them. But I wouldn't bog down too much on, focusing on, I don't want to say acquiring the old stuff, but I think you'll be able to get a lot of it from her probably, and then being able to use that information and kind of helping you make determinations about what the capital plan can look like.
Mika, what is the future of the ad hoc committee, the three people? Are they still involved? Are they going to join? Are they going to?
No, so that was a 1-year committee. It was an ad hoc 1-year committee. They did their work and they're done. And the recommendation was to form a committee, and you are now the committee.
Okay. All right.
So what would you say are the key components of the capital plan that the select board's looking for?
So I think you start with, in the documents that I shared with you, there were some statements from Machias Savings Bank. Those are all of the different reserve accounts the town has. And then we also, have all the different bonds. And then we also have areas like South Shore Drive that are currently not really anywhere in the plan in terms of how that's going to work. And so I think what the board is looking for is to be able to consolidate in some ways all of the reserve accounts that we have and what we've been saving for. So for example, the next fire truck that the town needs, there isn't really a written plan. Well, there's some information that Ralph has. I don't have anything as far as a written plan until the document I just shared with you. That is something that I recently saw. But knowing that we've been setting aside $50,000 every year for the last few years, with the anticipation that over the next, 6 years, that particular fire truck, there will be enough money in the reserve account. That's only one thing. There is, $5,000 have been put aside into a reserve account the last couple of years in the case that the town needed a new vehicle, that we would be able to have the funds. And so when the 4Runner just died, we were able to go into the reserve account and pull the money that we needed to buy the car that we have now. And similar with, public works equipment and things like that. And so there isn't a great plan, and there isn't a great really plan in terms of knowing the money that we're setting aside into all of these capital reserve accounts, and then how the bond we have is working against us. And so being able to come up with a better understanding of what is our flexibility to bond and to take on more debt, comparing to what we have to pay, and then how do we incorporate things like South Shore Drive, where it's a huge undertaking that just kind of fell into our lap very unexpectedly, and we're having to take that into account around all of these other things. Or even something with Stone Wharf, 1 year there's $100,000, another year there's $250,000. money's being set aside for some of these things, but without kind of a concrete plan of, to get to $3 million, we should set aside X amount of dollars for the next X amount of years type of a thing.
Okay, that was helpful. Is there a list of current capital projects? And to be more specific, we've got the reserve account. What funds are being spent out of the reserve account this year? And I would assume they'd only be spent for capital projects. And so how much are we spending this year? And do we have a list of those projects?
So the one thing that the town has not, in my experience, done too good of a job is in terms of preparing, these are reserve accounts. This is the money that we're putting into it this year, but this is X amount of dollars that we're going to expect to expend out of these reserve accounts. The money is being put in there and it is expended on needed basis, essentially. So this year, when the town vehicle separated, the base from the top, I went to the select board, asked them for a motion up to $15,000, and then we were able to go out and buy a new vehicle. And so what I can give you is the motions that I have for, so the select board has to make a motion in order for money to be pulled out of reserve accounts. And so once I have that motion, I have the authority to expend up to that X amount of dollars from those reserve accounts. And same thing goes with the school. They bought a new van. School board made a motion to authorize Aaron to expend up to, $300,000 on a new town school vehicle. And then we were able to take the money out. And so I
Nice
keep
job, Aaron.
track in a very non-organized way. Just, I have things written down and in my calendar about which motions I need to keep in mind and which motions I need to know about while I'm keeping track of the reserve accounts.
Are specific portions of the reserve accounts for specific purposes, or is it just one reserve account?
So if you look into the documents that I shared with you, there is let me pull it up. I just closed it. There are several different reserve accounts. The reserve accounts, so if you look at last year's town meeting and the town warrant, in the town warrant, there is a page and a half where it lists the reserve account and the description and approximately how much money is in it to that date and what the recommended amount is to go in. And so we keep track of that. We have Machias Savings Bank keeping track of that as a separate account. The name of the reserve account, how much money is in there. And so every month we record the interest that accumulates for those reserve accounts. And then we notify the bank if we have to pull money from that or put money into that. And so
when you got the new vehicle, the money was drawn from a specific reserve account.
Yes, and town meeting votes on the reserve account and description. And so the select board is authorized to be able to expend from those accounts, but only as long as it meets the criteria. So last town meeting, we had a reserve account called Indian Island Retaining Wall. And so that particular area, the town has done about as much as it's going to do, and there is not a lot to expend. And so the board recommended to the taxpayers to change that reserve account to coastal erosion and maintenance or something like that, and add more money to it and change the description. And so now we have a reserve account for unexpected coastal erosion damage related maintenance. So we're, trying to build that up. And every month we get a statement from the bank. And so if we had asked to withdraw money, we make the appropriate journal entries to allocate that the money has come or gone.
So the basic list of items that we're going to be spending money on, the basic list is the reserve accounts and the capital projects list that we've set money aside for. In addition to that, we've got a whole series of other projects which we're sort of aware of, but may or may not be on the list, like South Road and other things. So what we need to do is to determine what is on the list, what should be on the list, and as perhaps a broader question is, how do you get on the list? In other words, what's the process by which an item joins that list for capital expenditure? So, I mean, I think those are two of the things that we're going to need to work on and determine. Is everybody sort of in agreement on that, or?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I think at our next meeting, we ought to have in front of us the list of all the capital reserve accounts that you put in the monthly report that shows Bath savings, how many dollars are in all those accounts, right? You've given us that, but as a group, and at it on the screen and talking through everything that's on that list. We additionally ought to look at what money was added to reserve accounts for this year's budget, 2025, and the number of dollars I think that were spent in 2025 are kind of indicative of what's been put in the reserve account the last few years. You know, that's our current reserve account spending. And then to Jay's point, there's stuff that isn't on the list at all. Now there's a reserve for the Stone Pier, but that's a priority project. So we have to have some discussion about what's the timing of what we've currently approved some spending for the Stone Pier, I believe, or about to, with GEI to do a 30% design plan, correct? So we need to understand what that is.
Correct. But we also have grants that we have. And so the town did just receive a $75,000 grant. And so $75,000 of the money that we're spending is going to be, you know, grant funds to help us get to 30% design. The work that we just finished was from a grant as well. So we have been lucky enough that we haven't had to use a lot of the reserve accounts for that because we've been utilizing grants.
Right. But for example, and these numbers might be way off, if the Stone Pier is a $10 million project and we think we can have, you know, 80 or 90% grants for that, but the town needs to kick in the other 10 or 20%, then where's that $1 million or $2 million come from? And how does that work? So that would be an important discussion that this group could have and lay that into some kind of a spreadsheet that says, here's where we're at with capital spending, reserves, bonding. I don't know whether we have any leases, capital commitments. And then we've got ongoing sustainability stuff. And then we've got new projects, Stone Pier, town office, firehouse. And then I guess we've got the storm damage stuff. But we need input as to what grant assumptions we're going to make. And so that says what kind of funding we're going to need. And I think we're going to have to, we all have to get comfortable for what's our capacity to do these projects.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And along that,
And help the selectmen and help the selectmen in the town understand that. And we also need to look at, okay, what's the impact on taxes given these expenditures?
Yep, and I think those are all the things that a lot of people struggle and don't understand. You know, for example, we've been working with the residents of South Shore Drive trying to figure out what the options are. We got one quote and it was $4 million to do a restoration project to that embankment. You know, the residents want us to go ahead and do it. The town is not in a financial position to put even $2 million into a restoration project on a road. And that's an unexpected expenditure that's coming down our pike. And so right now we have an idea of what kind of funds we will receive from FEMA. And so knowing that information, I felt more comfortable asking the board to go into a contract to try to get a feasibility study done about what are options and how much that could cost. But those are the kind of things that's, you know, an unplanned, unexpected expense that just kind of came down our road when we've been working on areas like the Stone Pier. Same thing with barging. There are residents in that area that would like us to move and develop Sunset. Well, developing Sunset is, you know, it could potentially, expenses like that could drive a lot of people that live here off because the tax increase. And so I think those are the things that would be helpful to figure out what is the town's financial capacity.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jay. I'm just saying I've got a hard stop in 5 minutes. At 3, I've got to sign off. But go ahead, Jay.
Okay.
Very,
So-
very. Well,
Related to that, I am willing to draft an agenda for next Friday's meeting. And I'm thinking that we could start by looking at the complete list of the reserve accounts. And then also look at what reserve accounts were funded in 2025. And try to get some understanding of the reason we have those reserve accounts. And then we also ought to talk about known capital projects, right? And are there any other than the ones we talked about, the Stone Pier, town office, South Shore Drive, Bennett's Cove?
What I'm thinking is I do have to dash off, but I'd be happy to my homework for the week is work on the spreadsheet and try and get a simple basic spreadsheet and populate it with what we do have for known assets, looking at hard assets. And I can, if I can, I mean, if we got, say we all send questions to John, to get ready for this agenda next week as I develop questions, and so we get them all to John and then get them all to Vika, give her a chance to get that information ready. That's kind of that's an idea.
Works for me.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
Because I think we can have a productive discussion about the current state of the asset reserves and how that process is working. And then we can begin to understand from there what's our capacity to do these big future projects.
So I'll get my questions to you by Tuesday, say, John, and then get that a rough draft spreadsheet so you guys can take a look at it before our meeting. So when we show up to the meeting, we'll have, we can discuss specifics of that. That's okay.
Jay, you've been trying to say something?
Just a couple of things very, very quickly. The question you brought up about hard assets. I noticed in going through the stuff that you sent us, Vika, that nowhere was included the property the town owns, which is
It wasn't on the asset sheet?
I didn't see it. Maybe I missed it.
No, I think that's right.
I
think that's true.
And let's bring up a really nasty thought. we sell Sunset to somebody for $4 million. What's that bring us in terms of covering work on the Stone Pier or something? But that's for another topic, another time. But we should get that list of hard assets, including the property that the town owns. And the other thing is that when we come to think about projects, grant money, I mean, this town's always treated grant money like, manna from heaven, and it's always there and always coming. It's not gonna be. And we need to think about, if we have projects that we really truly need to do, is how we're gonna finance them. And if we get grant money comes in, terrific. But grant money comes and goes, and that's sort of a different topic. I think that we have to really think in terms of what the cost of a project is. And then if we can fund it through some grant money, terrific. But that's always a big question mark. And I think we have to be prepared to look at the whole project. Anyway, those were the.
If I could add one point to that, often big, large, complicated projects like the Stone Pier involve multiple years of effort, where you're going through layers of planning and engineering and sometimes multiple phases of construction. Understanding all that and sometimes seeding that so that you're in a position to get lucky when grant money appears is also important, so that you're in a position to be lucky when the time comes. And we should be pondering that notion for these probably 4 or 5 more complicated projects.
So
You broke-
Jay, with you being
Broke
the
up a little
chair,
for me, Jim. My internet connection's unstable, but basically what I heard you say is to apply for a grant, you have to have a certain amount of engineering work done, or you have to have the town's portion of the funding available so that you can move forward.
That, or
To
what I'm
secure a
saying
grant?
is sometimes external grant money appears because of some other event, a pandemic or whatever. I mean, that's a rare one, but things happen and suddenly money appears. Those who are prepared are the lucky ones. And so sometimes an investment of town money to be prepared or to be started can generate a bonus when the time comes.
Okay, we're losing Carol, we're losing Chip.
Well, we're watching him drive somewhere anyway.
We're hoping we aren't losing him.
Chip's, so we we still have a quorum. Chip gone.
I'll stay on until the bandwidth dies. Still is.
so John, do
Aaron,
you,
is there anything from a school's perspective we should be doing?
you might not be available.
Right.
Do you, John, so with you being the chair, you are kind of in charge of the agendas going forward. So do you want, in order to really follow the proper protocol with the town, we need to have our agendas posted 3 days before the meeting.
Okay.
So if you want to draft up an agenda and get it to me at some point next week, we don't, with side committees like this one, there isn't the same dire need to have a packet. We're not obligated legally to provide a packet to the public. The agenda we do need to have in order to meet the proper process. So if I can get that from you towards the beginning of next week, then we can have that posted. And then if you let me know what kind of information you want from me, I can provide that for you.
I think we might already have. So I think we want to look at the asset list. We want to look at the list of all the capital
Yeah, so
reserves. We want to look at
there's a
this year's
folder that
funding
I
for
made.
capital reserve. I think
There's
that's all
a folder
there.
that I made that's called capital. In there, you will see October, November, and December. Those are the last 3 months of the accounts, and you will see how money has come and gone based on the different motions that we have. And then the assets are also, I put a folder called capital, and in there is the fixed assets and some other information. What I'm going to add in the folder also is going to be the fiscal year 24 warrant. And those are the votes that the town meeting took place and voted things in. In there, you will see a list of all of the capital reserve accounts, but the descriptions, what they're applicable to. So if it says Stone Wharf, it will give, a sentence about what could be done. And so that will help you have a better understanding what each of those reserve accounts are supposed to go towards. And there's Aaron.
One related
Okay.
question, Vika. In the structure of capital assets and depreciation that I guess your auditor did, when it says 2008 as the year of origination, does that mean you acquired that asset when the town was formed out of Cumberland?
So that means it would be fiscal year 2008. Yeah,
So it could have been very old at that point. It isn't that it was new in 2008. It just appeared on your books in 2008.
depending on what it is, yes, you're right. Some things it could be that we acquired it. Some things, it could be that was what age they are, but most likely you are right.
Okay, I looked at all that and went, I don't remember that being such a big building here, so.
Okay, and then you're going to look for a list of town property per Jay's request, Vika?
Yeah, that information I could send. We have through our insurance company, we have a list of all of the information, and that information is in it. I thought it was on the assets, but I guess not.
Okay. Aaron, while you were gone, I said, having heard all this conversation, is there anything we should be looking at from the school or anything that would be helpful to you for this committee to do for this school?
I don't think so. We're actually on the school side. We're in the middle of kind of doing a little our own little facilities audit to develop kind of a ongoing maintenance plan and so forth. So I'm happy to share our progress on that as we move forward kind of within this context. But you can see like our school reserve accounts are all listed in that kind of chart of accounts. So yeah, so that's part of why I wanted to be here and participate, is knowing we were, kind of undertaking not the same process, but just looking at our kind of fixed assets and trying to develop a overall management plan for them.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? I'll get an agenda to you, Vika, by Tuesday.
Perfect.
It'll be along the lines of what we've discussed. Okay, thank you all. See you next Friday.
Thank you. Have a great day.